Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996. Welcome back to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Before we hear from our speaker, our tradition is to go around the room and introduce ourselves. Before we do that, just by a show of hands, is there anyone returning after a long absence or here for the first time? Oh, okay. Welcome. We'll try and remember your name so we can make you feel welcome during our social period afterwards. My name's Tom.
My name's Richard. My name's Kyle.
I'm Philip.
David.
My name's Carl.
My name is Michael.
I'm Kay.
I'm Lies.
I'm David.
Amos.
My name is Mark.
My name is Harley.
I'm Jim.
Paul.
Peter. I'm Clint.
David.
Tim. My name is Eric.
Tator.
I'm Bob.
My name is David.
My name is Roy.
My name is Michael.
My name is Paul.
I'm Richard. And I'm Joe.
And George.
Great. Welcome, everyone. So, our speaker today is one of our own. George has been a member of the Gay Buddhist Fellowship for several years now, and he has been vegan for 15 years. And he's going to speak on Buddhism, non-harming, and being vegetarian. George, welcome.
Thank you. Shantanu approached me in the spring of this year and asked me to speak initially, I think, as a Dharma duo with George Hubbard, who's not here, and then eventually it turned into today. So he said to speak a bit about my own spiritual journey and how my becoming a vegan fits into that, or I made it fit into that. So I was thinking about that, and I think in the beginning, we all, at least from my perspective anyway, are influenced by our parents. And my parents were definitely not Buddhists, and they were definitely not vegetarians or vegans. I was raised on the East Coast, western side of New Jersey, by Christian parents, Methodist, even though they came from either agnostic or atheist backgrounds themselves. My father found solace in a friend's home who were Episcopals, actually. The friend played guitar and sang like my father did, and their dreams were to grow up and be country music stars. And his family was a hospitable place for my father, who came from a troubled family. And they were Christians, so he decided he wanted to be Christian, but he didn't necessarily want to be Episcopal. So they found a Methodist church and a Methodist minister that they liked so much that they named my younger brother after him. And we grew up in a Methodist church in New Jersey there. And one of my fondest memories of growing up in that environment was there was an African-American family that lived down the road from us who had the same name. We were father and son, George Gibbs, and senior and junior. They had a daughter named Georgette as well. And mom's name was Lucinda. They had two other children that I don't remember their names. But part of the Christian charity was they were very poor people, and Mr. Gibbs always had health problems and needed help a lot. The family needed help, so we brought them food and we brought them clothing. And I always thought that was a beautiful thing. And that sort of was the good side of my Christian upbringing. It's my fondest memory. And when I was a teenager, I worked as a clerk in a grocery store chain called Acme Supermarkets. And Mrs. Gibbs used to come in there and call me Cousin George. And she'd come running in with a big smile on her face and just scream, "Cousin George," and give me a big hug. So there was a lot of love there, and I knew she always really appreciated the help we gave her and her family when they were struggling. But when I discovered that I was gay, fitting into the Methodist Church didn't seem like the right fit. So as soon as I was able, my father insisted that as long as we lived under his roof, we were Methodists, and we had to go. As a child, I went to Sunday school and to church and vacation Bible school in the summer and all of that. And most of my memories of there are pretty fond. The stories seemed very much like storybooks I had in kindergarten and first grade in school. And it was, I don't remember having any bad experiences there at all, actually. It wasn't until the gay issue came up that I thought, well, I just don't think I fit here anymore. So I left my parents' home to go off to college and move out of my parents' house. I had a choice, and I chose basically not to go to any spiritual practice, I suppose. If anything, I had my spiritual practice was discovering what gay meant and what I was going to do about that. And that inevitably got me thinking about getting out of where I lived there in New Jersey. We did have a gay pastor, I was thinking about that, at the church for a while, in that Methodist church from New York, young and very handsome man, and he used to preach a lot on Simon and Garfunkel's songs, music, which I thought was beautiful, but the elders in the church weren't going to have that. So, and the fact that he wasn't willing to sort of date some of the gals in the neighborhood also didn't sit well with them either. So I just remembered that. Nice guy, actually. When I was maybe 11, 12, 13, those years, I think those couple years he was around. So it was a nice gay influence there. I met a guy in New York who's become one of my closest friends. He still lives in Manhattan. And he was a bit of a mentor and said, maybe, you don't seem to fit here, George. Maybe you should check out Provincetown. So I ventured up to Provincetown on a vacation with him and met my first partner there, who was from California. After the summer, we spent the summer together there, moved to California together, and then he decided once we moved here that he wanted to live in New York City. He had grown up here, had enough of California, and he moved back to New York City, and he stayed there since. However, I love San Francisco. I've been here 36 years now. I was 22 then when Jeffrey and I moved here, and I'm 58 now. So it sits well with me. I'm a gardener. I love that I can garden year-round. I grow a little bit of what I eat, but not so much anymore. I used to be able to farm the property next door when my neighbor was a World War II veteran who was too old to take care of his property. But my new neighbors are from New Orleans, and they like lawns and bricks and things. So there's a few potatoes still coming up through the but it's not their thing. So I was actually looking for another partner after Jeffrey left. So, and this was the late 70s, early 80s. Nobody back then seemed to want to partner up, at least in my experience anyway. Everybody just wanted to have fun and move on. And lots of people that I experienced anyway had a lot of drug and alcohol issues as well back then. Sexual liberation, I'll call it, in a lot of ways. And sadly, most of my friends from that era are gone and died subsequent years later. But in the midst of that, I met my second partner, Nick, who decided he wanted to cohabitate. We had 12 years together, which was wonderful. he came from an atheist background, and I basically had no use for religion at that point, so I saw no reason to pursue that. So our spiritual practice basically was hiking and being in nature, and we did a lot of bicycle riding through the countryside, around the Bay Area here. When we had friends come visit from LA and from other places who liked to bike, we had 2 extra bikes, and we just always over the Golden Gate Bridge and off into the Marin Headlands, and sometimes up at the Russian River area too. We'd take our bikes and go up there. So spiritual practice then was basically hiking and biking, and that seemed to be enough for me. Then, during the worst for me of the AIDS crisis, 1992, that relationship with Nick was unraveling. Many of my friends were dying. I left Nick and made the mistake of having a rebound relationship right after that. I had learned that lesson the hard way. And fell into a place of very deep depression and anxiety and started having anxiety attacks. I have Kaiser, so I got some help. They put me on an anti-anxiety drug for a while, and the psychiatrist that I saw there suggested meditation practice as something that would help me with my anxiety issues. I also took a class at Kaiser on anxiety as well. And I was having headaches at the time too, I guess. And the psychiatrist seemed to think that meditation would help with the headaches as well. Also, during the midst of that time as well, I was offered a job in London. So I thought that would be a good opportunity to get me out of my circumstances for a little while and have a break. And while I was there, the people I was working for were partners, Tom and Nigel. They were fighting a lot, and being around that wasn't good for my psyche at the time. So I remember one night coming home, I joined the gym there and was working out. That helped a bit. I was coming home from the gym to Tom and Nigel's house, and I just felt overwhelmed. And I went by the house, and they were arguing so loudly that I could hear them outside, and it just made me even more overwhelmed. So I just needed a place to sit down. It was starting to rain, as it often does in London, and I think I just collapsed onto what I thought was a bench. It was a stone, and it happened to be in a churchyard, and this church had a big cross lit up on it. I saw it, and I thought of this harvest song we used to sing in the Methodist church when I was growing up called "We Gather Together to Ask the Lord's Blessings." And I sang it, and it made me feel better. So after that experience, I asked Tom, after I think Nigel stormed off that night, and I said, Tom, you have a beautiful voice, I remember. Could we go to the corner church here and just sing this weekend? I think it would help me a bit with what I'm going through. He said, oh, God, George, church. I'll go once, he said, but after that, you're on your own. So I went to this church and with Tom, and he quickly left afterward, but I met the vicar there, who happened to be a very lovely, gay, campy, sassy gardener guy. And he became my friend and really helped me through that dark, tough time. And after I was finished working on Tom's house there, I would go and help him in the gardens around the church. The church was built on the foundation of another church that I guess had burned down, and there was a lot of garden space around it, so I was gardening with him there, and I always loved the garden. And his name is Roger, and we're still very good friends and pen pals. And so I thought, well, maybe I should give church a chance. Here's a gay man, and there were several gay men in the congregation as well. So I did. Singing made me feel better while I was there. And that worked out pretty well. And then I came back to San Francisco after the job was finished and thought I could find a church here that felt like that. A friend who was a Buddhist, actually, at the time, who'd grown up Presbyterian, met this woman, met this woman, Jean, who was a co-pastor, a lesbian co-pastor at a church called 7th Avenue Presbyterian Church in the Inner Sunset. And she took me over there and dropped me off, and she said, I'm not a Christian anymore, George, but I'll get you here, and on my own, just like Tom. So I got involved there. It was a good fit for me at the time. I got involved there. They made me a deacon soon thereafter because I was volunteering for lots of things. I had an open hand route. They had an open hand route there helping people with AIDS, feeding people with AIDS. I did that for about 6 years. I visit people in hospitals. I wrote Christmas, birthday, get well, congratulations cards as a deacon to the congregation and friends. So it was a good energy. But I have to say, after a while, just the whole God thing didn't sit with me, I guess. A friend there thought I should check out MCC, so I went over to MCC for a while, and I went there for a while as well, got involved there a little bit. They had a homeless feeding program at the time. I volunteered for that, called Simply Supper, for about 5 years. Enjoyed that very much. So the outreach part of the Christian faith, I really liked. The helping other people, the social service aspect of it, I liked it a lot. And that fed my spirit. And then along came, I guess, maybe look back up a little bit. During the time I came back and going to the Presbyterian Church at MCC, there was a guy there that was a deacon with me named Sam who had HIV, and he's since passed away, sadly. And he was going to this meditation group at Davies Medical Center, which is a couple blocks from my house. It was a guided meditation, and for the first half, and then the second half was a gentleman named Greg, who's still a good friend, plays didgeridoo. So the first half was guided meditation, and we had a check-in, and then we'd sit and listen to the didgeridoo. And the two just dissolved my headaches and made me feel great and helped me relax. I always left there feeling great. So that was my first exposure to meditation practice. It wasn't necessarily a Buddhist-based place, but it was similar, I guess, to me. So at MCC, I met Ji Singh, who's, I think, spoken here, and I actually was on a retreat at Vajrapani with some of you guys a number of years ago here, and he and Roger Corliss co-facilitated a retreat there. And he started Kusanga at MCC, and at that time, he drew a crowd there from a cosmic mass I think he was part of in the East Bay while he was going to seminary in Berkeley. And a lot of the people there were vegans and vegetarians. And I liked that concept. I liked the idea that my eating could not participate in the killing of animals and not have as big a footprint environmentally on the planet. And I thought that made sense to me. And actually they even brought a film called Peaceable Kingdom, I think it was called, to the Sangha one time and showed it, and then we talked about it afterward. It made sense to me. Animals feel things, and animals are traumatized, and when you take the calf away from the mother, that animal's hurt and hurting. When you impregnate an animal constantly to become a milk producer, and eventually those udders wear out, that's a painful experience for that cow. So I saw myself for the first time in the place of the animal that I was eating from, I was taking from. Never thought about that before. And then I learned later from some of the people there, and then since first joined the San Francisco Bay Area Vegetarians, and then now I'm a member and board member of the San Francisco Vegetarian Society, about environmental impacts of raising cattle and raising chickens. And these days, so many places here in California, we're fortunate, a lot of cows are out in the fields, but in a lot of places in the country, they're in factory farms, which are horrible. My only experience here of that is along the route Interstate 5. There's a place that you can't miss. It's just, the smell is horrible. And then once you get there, there's all these cows, in their own feces and urine, just living that way until they're slaughtered. That can't be good or cool. So my understanding of being Buddhist from Ji Singh and from Kusanga is the biggest word that comes to me is compassion. Compassion for yourself, and compassion for the rest of the world, and compassion for the planet, and compassion for animals. So all of this vegan, vegetarian thing just made a lot of sense to me, that my footprint could be lighter if I could change my diet. So the next thing to learn, of course, was the nutritional side of things. So I actually still go, and I'm ongoing. I go to a vegan dinner every Wednesday, which was put on by the San Francisco Vegetarian Society. It's at Opera Plaza here on Van Ness. And a husband and wife who have a nonprofit called Wellness Central. And she, the wife, Patricia, is a graduate of Bowman College in nutrition, and she makes these very healthy vegan meals every week and speaks on nutritional issues. And David's an attorney and grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist church, which are vegetarians. So it's his background as well. So I'm learning more and more all the time about that aspect of it, but I've been vegan now for 15 years, so I learned some of it early on from the San Francisco Vegetarian Society and membership and San Francisco Bay Area Vegetarians. I asked people there, or I went, now these days you can just Google things and go on the web and look for answers to your questions. The only thing that I'm aware of that you can't get from a vegan diet, because we clean our food so well, is B12, which comes from a bacteria. Cows eat it, it's in the grass and the soil, and they eat it, and it's in their milk. So the only way we can get it, is to take a supplement or recreate that bacteria. And these days, soy milks, rice milks, and some grain milks, and almond milks, and nut milks are fortified with it, just like cow's milk is as well. I take a supplement to be sure I get enough, which is cultured from the same bacteria that we wash off our food when we clean our food so well with chlorinated water. Yeah. So, but everything else, nuts and grains and beans and rice, plenty of protein. There's some literature I have out there actually that speaks to that, the protein myth, because usually the most common question that a vegan and vegetarian gets constantly is, where do you get your protein? So the answer is nuts and grains and beans and rice, and there's plenty. And there's some information about that, and you can Google all that stuff as well. Since becoming vegan, I'm lighter. I used to weigh about 170 some pounds. I weigh about 147 now. So I feel much better being lighter. Everything's, as I'm getting older, it's lighter on my bones. I'm still aging, so it's not going to cure everything, that's for sure. I still have low back issues when I pick up things that are too heavy. And I have a genetic heart condition as well that I just found out about 3 years ago. I have recessive genes from both sides of my family, and I have a condition called Bruein syndrome, which makes your heart beat too fast. And if it beats too fast for too long, you go into cardiac arrest and you die. That was an unwelcome surprise a few years ago. But they checked all my blood stuff out and said it has nothing to do with my vegan diet, because I knew my family would immediately, because they think I'm nuts for being vegan anyway. They knew they would immediately say, what's your vegan diet that's killing you? And no, sorry, it's bad genes, Mom. Some of them are from you, and some of them are from Dad, but they're both from you. So, but also, every time I've gone down the 5, which I don't do very often, to Los Angeles or Palm Springs to see friends, I feel sorry for those animals in there, and I can imagine that feces and that urine is leaching into the groundwater and probably polluting in that much concentration in those lots. And those lots are not an uncommon thing around the U.S. these days. So, and now China and other countries are modeling after us and are eating more meat and less vegetables and fruit, which is what they grew up on themselves. So I'm sad to see that on the media and other places. So, and here in California, I consider myself very fortunate to live in a breadbasket of fresh, organic produce and vegetables. It's amazing. I feel very lucky. So it's not a difficult thing at all. Half a dozen vegan restaurants in the neighborhood. The thing you still have to be careful of, at least I've learned anyway, is that if there's money in it, someone will produce anything to sell it to you. So there's vegan junk food, and there's unhealthy vegan food too. Vegan desserts have processed sugar in them, which in large doses is not healthy for you. And they have palm and coconut oil, which is fat, saturated fat. So you have to be careful of that too. So healthy choices within the vegan world is important as well. And as organic as much as you can afford and as possible. Like I said, we're fortunate to have all that in our right outside the door here. It's amazing. And you can have boxes delivered to your house of organic produce every week through a bunch of organizations as well. And be involved in a lesser footprint, I think a healthier way to live, at least it has been for me. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Want to open it up for questions?
Here, I was surprised actually when I got here that so few people are vegetarian or vegan. There are a few of you, but not too many. For my former sangha with Ji Singh, I'd say 70% of us were either vegan or vegetarian. But we're programmed. I was programmed into a carnivorous family, so changing that was challenging. It really was. So I understand that too. Yeah.
Well, we can either open it for questions or you can do a cooking demo.
I split my time. It's healthier if I eat at home because I know it's organic, because I'll choose organic food. That's all I buy from the farmers markets, and I shop at Rainbow all the time, or other avenues out by the ocean on the Judah line. But when you go eat out, you don't know what it's going to be really, and how much sodium and fat and what kind of oil they use, unless you ask. You can ask those things. I try to avoid MSG and that kind of stuff as well, preservatives and things. I'm a label reader. And on that note, too, there's a proposition on the ballot on Tuesday. Please vote yes on 37. You deserve to know what's in your food, whether it's genetically modified or not, because God knows what goes into genetically modified food. You can probably research that and find out. A lot of people, especially the big companies that make the genetically modified food, don't want you to know, so they don't want to have to label it. So they spent millions, on 37. But if you really want to know what's in your food and you care about that, you are what you eat, so to speak, then it's be nice to know. And I think it should be labeled, and I think I certainly would like to know, so it's your choice. Sure, we can open up for questions. Talk to one?
Well, I'd like to comment on a couple of things. I've known George over the years, but two things that he did say. I came from to vegetarianism in a slightly different way, through meditation and yoga, and I've been a vegetarian since 1971, but I'm not a vegan. And a couple of the specific comments I wanted to make was just about Highway 5 and going by the animal farm there. As I understand it, the animals are sensitive enough to know what they're in for, and it injects adrenaline into their system and creates more toxins that come through your food as you eat. And the other thing that you had mentioned, it might come back to me, but I want to share a little bit about how I became vegetarian. And I went to a retreat that Swami Satchidananda gave in 1970 or 71. And I, like George, had never considered not eating meat 2 or 3 times a day. And by the end of the retreat, I felt lighter. We weren't allowed meat. I felt better and so forth. But it just put an idea into my head. And by that Thanksgiving, the idea of eating meat and the sensitivity to animals sort of came as a secondary thing. The main teaching was about the animals, the vegetarians in the zoo are quiet and calm and so forth, and the meat eaters are vicious and things like that. And the teaching was that it would affect our meditation as well, and we would be calmer without eating that kind of food. So as I went along, by that Thanksgiving was my last meat. I sort of take it off. But I found that, I've become much more sensitive. I've sort of grown into the damage, to the unnecessary harm and damage to animals. And I know what it was, and I'll finish with this. It was the fact that what are you going to do about your protein? All this protein. Well, what I found out, and it was part of the teachings as well, was that our body does not really require the amount of protein that we think it does. And over a period of time, the body will acclimate, but you need to supplement that with, like tofu and beans and rice and stuff like that. But after that, the body does not. And I consider becoming a vegetarian the most important thing I've ever done in my life, with lasting impact. So that's my approach.
I just remembered I had along that. Thank you, Tatwan. I had the good fortune over the years with Ji Sing actually to go to Green Gulch several times, and I also with some friends from the Presbyterian Church went to Tassajara as well. And then when I was involved with the Q Sangha as well, Ji Sing encouraged us to meet our teacher, who was Thich Nhat Hanh. And so when he and the monks and nuns would come to the U.S. every so many years from Plum Village in France, there's a monastery in Southern California called Deer Park. And I had the good fortune of going down there a couple times as well. And part of all three of those experiences it was always at least vegetarian, if not almost entirely vegan food that we ate there, and it was absolutely delicious and fresh and wonderful. I also went to Spirit Rock too and did the week-long silent meditation with Larry Yang and a gal from the Yes, exactly. Wonderful experience too, and incredible food there as well. At Deer Park, part of your practice was preparing and cut. I peeled potatoes and I chopped celery, and it was part of your practice over the course of the retreat there with Thich Nhat Hanh and his monks and nuns there. Working meditation or something like that it was called. And the same with Spirit Rock too. I was in charge of cleaning the mats I had a team, and we cleaned the mats after the food was prepared to appreciate the meal. Met the loveliest people at Thich Nhat Hanh's gatherings actually at Deer Park, which is in Escondido, California. For those of you who don't know, it's near San Diego. And if you ever get a chance to go, it's very popular, so be prepared for that. But it's a lovely experience. I really enjoyed that. I've been there twice, once with my friend Julie and once with my friend Steve from Q Sangha years ago. I wasn't able to go the last time he was here, but I've done that. And also, there's a lady, when I was volunteering at Simply Supper at MCC, there was a group who'd come there and help us called Mother's Kitchens from Guru Amachi, I think it is, right? Is that right, Paul? Amachi, yeah. And she has an ashram out in San Ramon, and I went there one time because they're lovely people, and it always was delicious vegetarian food that they were offering for free to homeless people on the streets of our city. Again, going back to compassion. And I thought, I need to meet this woman. So I went out there one time when she came. She really draws a large crowd. And she's the hugging guru, I think is her. So if you have the patience, you get there early and get in line for the hug, then you've done well. But I was number 2,000 and something, and it was going to be 3 a.m. before I got my hug. So I appreciated seeing other people get hugged and felt amazing energy there, and the food was all vegetarian and delicious. And I thought, given the volume of people, they really handled it well as far as guiding people who came in cars. I happened to go on BART, and then they had a shuttle. It was a lovely experience, and people chanted, and people drummed, and that was really a nice experience too. And also, I would imagine that most of those people are vegetarians as well. It was also a very good experience.
Yes, growing up in Lebanon, there's like a lot of our cuisine is sort of naturally vegetarian because there's 40 days of fasting and all that. It's been done for 2,000 years, so there's these classics. And so I've always been drawn to that. I would always like make myself eat that piece of meat next to it. But then there's these amazing dishes with ground lamb and stuff that I grew up with, that I remember being in the village, and you'd see the lamb and you'd see the slaughter and you'd watch it, and you know, there was a very direct, immediate aspect to it. And I'm not vegetarian. And now, and part of me does kind of work with both sides. I'm not sure. There's a part of me that appreciates sometimes that, you know, going back to basics and eating what our ancestors ate, and I can see there's a certain kind of beauty in that. My goal is to, and I still think I want to treat human beings. I don't want to be a nasty vegetarian. I'm not a vegetarian. I don't want to be like nasty to human beings, and you know, like the whole thing's like compassion is universal. But I've still worked with both, and I said I've never been. I mean, it's easy for me because I've never been drawn to like a piece of steak and that kind of thing. But there's this certain traditional dishes that we grew up with, and like, would I never eat this thing again? You know, so it's an interesting thing. But it's part of my. And there's a movie, Forks Over Knives, that I've not seen. Because I'm sure if I see it, I'll become vegan. So I'm not quite ready to take it.
There are a couple of doctors in that film that talk about the health issues around the diet as well, because they're both vegans. One is Dr. Esselstyn, who's a cardiologist from the Midwest somewhere. And then there's another one, T. Colin Campbell, his name is. He came out with a book called The China Study. And it was a study done in China over the course of many years and checking people with vegan or vegetarian diets and people with meat-eating diets and the health risks that went with that and the differences in the cancer rates and all that stuff. It was pretty profound. And so they teamed up and were both in Forks Over Knives to talk about the food you eat. You are what you eat, when it comes down to it. And they wanted people to know the things that... It wasn't actually until, and I also learned from one of the films I saw within the realm too, that before the 1950s, more people lived on farms and more people raised their own food. And then after World War II, processed food all of a sudden became part of our lives. And for my family, my mother and father had 6 children. I'm the oldest of 6. And we didn't come from affluence, so they both had to work. My mother needed something that was convenient, so these foods that were coming out were convenient. And McDonald's exploded at that point too. And it was easy to just go there, and it was inexpensive. But if you really look at what's in McDonald's food, you wouldn't touch it. And especially after, it was one of the other films that was talking about processing plants where they process the beef for that. And the feces and urine and other stuff that's in that stuff is just nasty. You would never get anywhere near
But I
it.
think it's important to know, like, I have vegan friends that eat, you know, horrible, like vegan desserts and things all the time, and I could buy the grass-fed, free-roaming, happy cows and chickens and lean meat, and I do all my organic cooking and everything, almost everything I eat at home. So I think it's not going to be, for me, it's not going to be the health thing as much as maybe the passion towards animals thing part. That's, you know,
Yeah.
I'll have to figure that
Yeah.
out.
I think bottom line, that's what did it for me too.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, if you put yourself in the place of the cow or the place of the chicken, would you want someone to come and take your eggs away? You know, you're supposed to sit on those and hatch them, right? And have babies. Or would you want someone to take your calf away? Or would you want someone to continuously impregnate you so you produce milk for another species? When that milk is supposed to be for the calf? So I don't know. You know? And fish. My grandfather was a fisherman. I grew up on a fishing boat with him. And I used to feel sorry for those poor fish coming out of the water. Imagine us being underwater, right? Because it's the same scenario. They're suffocating. You know, imagine us being dunked and suffocating as well underwater. And then the hook in its mouth. I felt so sorry. The thing would be like, you know. The more I thought about it, I thought, I can't, you know, why didn't I think about this sooner? I can't do this anymore. And if I can eat and eat healthy and not do all this, this is great. And then someone also brought up that one time on one of the groups too, that our teeth aren't like, if we didn't have like spears or guns or whatever to kill these animals, and some of us can run faster, I suppose, than others, but chasing down an animal to try to kill it, and then trying to kill it with our hands, and then trying to eat it raw without cooking it, chewing something apart, we just don't have teeth for that. Whereas a lot of animals that are big carnivores, like cats and things, have these enormous, So it may just not. We may have just been doing it for so many years that it's just become part of our nature. But I don't think we're genetically built for, wrestling at animals on the ground and tearing it apart with our teeth. I just don't.
George, I'm curious the transition from what you grew up to on versus becoming vegetarian. Was it gradual, where you maybe dropped off beef and then eventually pork, or did you just one day say, I see all this suffering and I want to be compassionate to animals? Did you just one day you're totally vegan?
Yeah, cold turkey. I don't know. I don't necessarily know whether that's the right way to go. I don't know whether.
Smoking the same day.
Well, along that vein, I did smoke when I was like 17 to about 21, 22. And the same thing. I had moved to California. A friend of mine from high school came to visit me, and we did that walk from the waterfront up to Coit Tower, and I was winded. And I thought, I'm 22 years old. I shouldn't be winded. It's ridiculous. I took the pack of cigarettes and threw it in the garbage, and that was it. I was done with cigarettes. And alcohol for me, I did love wine. My partner of 12 years loved wine, came from an affluent family, gourmet cooks, all of them, and we had an extensive wine cellar when we lived together. He collected wines from all over the world, but I come from a family full of alcoholics. We've had to do interventions on several of them, so I thought, with that genetic makeup, I'm better off giving that up too. So one day, I just said, I love wine, but that's enough. Can't do this anymore. I could end up, I don't even talk about some of my siblings' issues and stuff with that. But lost several relatives, cirrhosis of the liver, to alcohol. Yes.
So I think the health arguments and the environmental arguments are important, but it's the ethical argument that I guess is of most interest to me. And I think to a certain extent, we're all animals, and at some point, to a certain extent, it's in our nature to eat meat, being omnivores, and it's in the nature of the animal to be prey, but I think that to the extent that we've evolved and that we have the circumstances, it seems that if I don't have to hurt the poor little thing, then maybe I shouldn't, and the truth is that I don't have to, and that seems to, also go with the first precept, right? And but I do think that it matters maybe situationally, maybe there are people, because of their health situation or because of the circumstances that they're in or where they live or whatever, that that maybe for them, it's okay, and they're not accumulating karma, whereas maybe I am. And, so those are kind of some of the things that come to mind for me, and I'm wondering, here, because I think there's a lot of practice experience here, and I'm wondering, is there anybody here who actually, has thought all this through, and to the extent I still eat meat, and it's more just because I haven't quite, it's just one of a number of things in my life that I haven't quite gotten around to kind of resolving for myself and actually incorporating into my life and walking the talk, etc. But I'm wondering if there's somebody here who has actually kind of gone through this whole process for themselves, and they still eat meat, and they have kind of worked through the ethical argument and feel that they're fine. And I'm wondering if anyone wants to kind of speak to their own kind of experience like that. On that. Maybe afterwards, privately.
Over a hamburger.
I'm just kind of curious. To the extent, I think to a certain extent it's just that people just kind of haven't bothered to deal with it and reconcile it, but if there's someone who has, then I just would like to kind of understand their feelings around it.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to answer your question. And for me, I read a book, and the book was called Diet for a New America. And it was written by John Robbins, of the Baskin-Robbins fame. And the arguments that he presented were very compelling for me. And at the time when I read it, I had tapered down my meat consumption. I would never buy it at the store. If it was served to me, I'd eat it, but I would never cook it, prepare it for myself. And I grew up, my father had a repair shop, a auto mechanic shop, maybe a half mile from a slaughterhouse in St. Louis, Missouri. And we could smell it, we could drive by it and hear hear these sounds, and I was found it very disturbing. So that was part of my childhood experience. And, it wasn't traumatic, but it was, something. And then I've also sort of said to myself that if I raised the animal, blessed its existence, slaughtered it myself, prepared it, I could see eating it. But I'm not willing to do any of those things. It's like the act of slaughtering is like very painful. And there's a book written by this woman, Novella Carpenter, and it's like City Farm or something. It's like a bestseller. And she's talking about raising these animals and then slaughtering them, and I couldn't even read the passage. It was so painful to me. Just to read it through her eyes. And so those have had really powerful influences on me. And then to people that do eat meat, I also sort of suggest that you can taper down and you can pick a day and have meat-free Mondays or whatever. And also the idea that you can use meat as opposed to the main course. It could just be something that you use for flavoring, and to eat less of it. And so that's my whole story.
Just to chime on that, I've been vegetarian for about a year and a half. The transition was 10 years. So, first it was beef, then it was pork, and then a lot of soybean-based products. But then I heard of this PBS program the other day. It was the Virgin Diet book by J.J. Virgin. And she claims that if you adhere to 97 items, it's almost vegetarian, that your life will be more enhanced. You might lose weight that you want to lose. But what I found when I became vegetarian is that my taste buds woke up. And it was almost like being on a marijuana high, the intensity of flavors and the depth of food you're eating. And so I just think that from where my spiritual practice is, that it is in more sync with who I am and how I want to treat the world, and how you said, having a less environmental footprint. And my brother lives very close to Tracy. In fact, it's called Mountain House. And they took a pasture and converted it to 5-bedroom little houses, or the big houses. And I'm of Filipino descent, and so when we get together for birthdays and christenings and Catholic kind of stuff, there's usually 50 of us. And so here we are last summer, and they're doing a barbecue, and we're out in the garden. And the wind changed pattern, and we got the smell, and we all came running into the house. And so I didn't grow up down the street from a thing, but when I visualize the trauma and the pain and the ugliness of the agribusiness corporate moneymakers, I believe they've sold a bill of goods to the American public of all the stuff just to make money. And when I think of beef or pork, I think of traumatized things that I'm putting into my body, and do I really want that to be incorporated into my system? So anyway, being a vegetarian, I'm regular. I get lots of roughage. There's a variety of legumes I cook, and I've learned to enhance with enhancing maybe the boring stuff that might be considered vegetarian. And I just think it was one of the most enlightening, or if you want to have major high points of going into my, I'm going to be 60, and I just think that it was a major thing. And if I had to do it over again, I wish I'd become vegetarian at age 20.
I think we're about out of time.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
So and it's Harris Ranch that's down I-5 that you drive past.
Can't miss it.
It's been nicknamed Couchwitz.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty awful. And there's a bunch of literature on the table if you're interested at all. There's one called The Protein Myth, and all the other things we covered with vegetarian diet, and websites and things too.
Thanks, that was very informative. Appreciate it. Do we have announcements? Jim?
Thank you, George, for a very provocative and heartfelt talk, and I really appreciate people's chiming in. And I just bought 3 honey-baked ham bones and soup. I'm the host. I bear really unhealthy treats. There's an innocent pineapple. God knows how it was grown. Oh, God. And cookies and a little loaf thing. They won't kill you, but they won't make you happy. The Donna Bowl is around the corner. I'll be passing around. You cannot escape. I will track you down to specify or above as much as you can afford if you have any money left after this election. There's hot water in these 2 things. If you have tea, please rinse your cup out with hot soapy water in the sink. A group of people tend to gather around 12:30 to go out to lunch. I don't know if that's all. Okay, next week, from the program committee, Carol Newhouse is talking, and she's a long-term and very speaker of ours. She's the head teacher of the Berkeley Lesbian Sangha, and her talks are always very direct and personally based and helpful. I among others in the group, sing in the San Francisco Choral Society, and in 2 weeks we're giving a fabulous set of concerts, the Schubert's Mass in A-flat, which he wrote as he was dying of third stage syphilis, and it's absolutely from another dimension. There's the last 6 months of his life, he was like a factory of masterpieces as life was raining from him. He was covered with lesions inside out, and but he kept working, and it's a very soulful and magnificent piece. Also, the Brahms Schicksal, which is a one-movement piece that you can ignore the lyrics, but the music is celestial. Anyway, so that's in 2 weeks. I'll send out a blurb. I think that's it for me.
Clint?
GBF also has a Feed the Homeless project. I think most of you know about it. It's for the Larkin Youth Center. It's a homeless shelter for young people. I think the cutoff age is like 22. And we always prepare dinner. Sorry, it's not vegan because they like their meat. But we have like vegetarian alternatives. But anyway, it's always the first Saturday of the month, and it's just a team get together and prepare the meal. And the kids are very appreciative. They're really great kids, and they eat very simple. The shelter makes sure that they're nourished and eat, but it's very simple food. So we kind of give them a fancier, more comfort food type experience. So if you're interested in being part of the team, you just buttonhole me outside and I'll get your name and contact information.
Peter.
I'm the new treasurer for GBF. It's taken a few weeks. So people, and since I'm here frequently, you can give receipts to me, and I don't have the checkbook with me. I mean, I can write the check on the spot. You could still do it through the mail if you want, but there is one point I need some help on. If anyone knows the exact name, address, and so forth that we put on our 501c nonprofit status report, I would appreciate hearing from you about what that is.
I think I've got it.
Paul?
George talked about this woman, Amma, and she'll be coming around Thanksgiving. I believe it's the 20th to the 25th to San Ramon. She's very open to anyone of any faith and any denomination, and personally I find her very impressive. So if anyone's interested, please contact me and I'll give you more information.
Great. Okay.
Yes, GBF is having an annual Thanksgiving potluck, again on the Thursday, November 22nd at my place in East Bay. So if you're interested in coming, please let me know, because we try to coordinate dishes, and we always have plenty to eat for both vegetarians and non-vegetarians.
Paul?
Yeah, I got 2 free tickets to Mahler's night. It's going to be at Zellerbach next Sunday at 3 p.m. So if anyone wants the other ticket, I have several friends that they're not interested. So
Thank you.
We'll hear from next time.
Anyone else? Okay, let's stand for our dedication of marriage.
Standing.
I got it. That's okay.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.